So it's really great to be here. I've been asked to tell you what you're not told about casual sex, and what you're not told could actually fill a few books. And you know what? I've written a few books on that subject. So the first book that I wrote is called Unprotected. And I wrote it while I was a psychiatrist at the Student Counseling Center of UCLA. I was there for 12 years, and during that time, I saw thousands and thousands of students came through my office with all sorts of problems. I realized after a few years that a lot of these kids, especially the young women, were suffering because of the sexual decisions that they had made. And as I thought more about it and I listened to more and more stories, I discovered that my profession is partially responsible for the suffering of my patients. And the reason for that is because there is so much political correctness in the field of mental health and women's health and sexual health. And so I wrote this book, Unprotected. A campus psychiatrist reveals how political correctness in her profession endangers every student. And each chapter is about a different issue, a different example. For example, how HIV, the whole topic of HIV is very politicized, and it's treated differently than other diseases. The topic of hooking up and how we aren't warning young people, especially young women, that there are consequences, and often people suffer a lot as a result of their hookups, and I'll talk more about that. I have a chapter about faith and how it's been proven without a question that that belonging to a faith community, not just being spiritual, but belonging to a community and participating in prayer and community events has significant impacts on a person's well-being and how they deal with adversity, including mental illness and physical illness. And yet, my colleagues, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, we don't encourage people to get involved with their faith. And the reason for that is that most of my colleagues actually are not themselves people of faith. So they don't see it that way, and they therefore don't promote it. They promote healthy diet and exercise and so on. But actually faith is as important, if not more important, than all those things. So anyway, I wrote that book, Unprotected, and after that, I decided to look more into sex education itself, because the students that were coming into my office that I was talking to were so misinformed about sexuality and about their sensitivity to intimate behavior. And so I wrote this book, You're Teaching My Child What? And a lot of the motivation that I had to do all this was because the kids that I would explain some of this science to that you're about to hear, after they would hear it from me, they'd say, why didn't I know? Why didn't anyone tell me all this stuff? Dr. Grossman, you have to go out and speak to not college students, that's too late, they tell me. You have to talk in high schools and in middle schools. So I wrote these books, and now I'm out here speaking, and I want to go through a whole lot of stuff very quickly that you're not told about casual sexuality, and then we're going to do some cool stuff at the end that's a lot of fun. So first of all, you are not told that scientifically what's called beer goggles, have you heard of beer goggles? Okay, beer goggles is the idea that once you've had a few drinks, you see people differently and they seem more attractive than they really are. Now that really does exist. Studies have been done. Now I don't know if you can see, but it shows here, okay. This is how this young woman looks at 8 o'clock when you haven't had any drinks. 10 o'clock, she's looking a little better. And 1, by the time you've really had a lot to drink, she looks very gorgeous. Okay, that's beer goggles. What happens is that alcohol And the same is true for guys, okay? Alcohol affects, there's a center in your brain that is responsible for how we assess a person's facial attractiveness. Okay, there's a specific center in the brain that just deals with facial attractiveness. And alcohol has an impact on that center of the brain, so that you actually start thinking that someone is more attractive as time goes on and you get more intoxicated. A study was done in which 80 young people were shown photographs of the opposite sex. They were shown the same photographs before they had any drinks and after they had some drinks. And after they had some drinks, it worked both ways, the men for the women and the women for the men. They consistently rated the face as being more attractive than when they were not, before they had started drinking. Now, of course, in the morning, you both look different. You look more like you did at 8 o'clock. Okay, so that's beer goggles. Now, next, hookups. You're not told how often hookups lead to regret. A hookup is defined as an unplanned sexual encounter between two people who have no plans to see one another again. At Princeton University, there was research that was done about hookups, and this is true especially for young women. Before the hookup, a third of the women were hoping for a relationship to come out of it. After the hookup, 80% of girls wished that it hadn't happened, and 84% after a few sexual interactions with a guy, even if in the beginning they had no interest in him emotionally whatsoever, 84% began to feel vulnerable and wonder, does he care about me? The numbers for the guys are lower. I admit, there's a difference between men and women, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. People lie for sex. Another thing you're not told. Sex education tells young people, ask your partner, find out their history. Ask them if they've ever had an STD. Ask them if they've had other relationships. Ask them if they've had same-sex relationships. In a perfect world, everyone would just tell the truth. And that would work out really nicely. But you know what? In this world, people lie. And they especially lie about their sexual histories and about their HIV status. Raise your hands if you know someone who's extremely naive and basically thinks that all people are good and tell the truth. We all know people like that. And actually, the younger you are often, the more you are naive and trusting. And that's dangerous. You have to live in the real world. Research shows that up to 75% of this, and this is, the misrepresentations here are most prominent with men who have sex with men and bisexual men, but the numbers are still there and still relatively high in the heterosexual community as well. But I want to warn young women especially that up to 75% of bisexual men, men who are having sex with men and women, do not reveal to their female partners that they're also having sex or did have sex with men. And that's very, very important because bisexual men are a bridge of bringing HIV from the gay community into the heterosexual community. And it's very, very important to know that if you have intimate behavior with a man who has also been with another man, even with a condom, that's a much higher risk behavior. You're not told that. You're not told that young women are much more vulnerable to casual sex and sexually transmitted diseases than men are. And that's due to biology. biological factors, this is from the CDC, place women at greater risk than men. You're not told this either, and I'll just very briefly tell you why. The cervix is the entrance to the uterus. The cervix has something called a transformation zone, and what you see on the right is the many layers of the transformation zone that as a girl gets older, she goes through adolescence and her early 20s, the cells that cover her cervix develop, and she grows a thicker covering to her cervix. The thicker the covering, the less vulnerable she is to infection. So let me show you a better picture, actually. So this is what the cervix looks like. And in an immature cervix, this is an adult cervix, in an immature cervix, that yellow orange area in the middle is only one cell thick. Very vulnerable, very easy to infect. The area around it, that nice pink area, is like a shield. It's like many, many layers thick. And the older you get, and everyone wants to know, when is my cervix going to be mature? Well, everyone is different, but basically it's healthier and wiser to wait until your early 20s. I mean, it's obviously medically accurate to say that the healthiest decision is to postpone all sexual behavior until you are in a lifelong committed relationship with one person, aka marriage. And this is not only from a moral point of view, but from a medical point of view. Two people who delay all sexual behavior and then get together and are monogamous never have to worry about any STDs whatsoever. And that's another thing that you're not told. So this is the human papilloma virus. You've heard of HPV, of course. You've heard of the virus. You've heard of the vaccination and so on and so forth. This is what it looks like. It's actually a lot smaller than that. And HPV is rampant. And the thing with HPV, with both men and women, is that a person can be carrying it and not know. Okay, so this is from the, 40s or 50s, and it's like this poster that they made for the military in World War II. She may look clean, but pickups and good time girls, prostitutes, spread syphilis and gonorrhea. And then it says at the bottom, you can't beat the Axis if you get VD. Okay, so that's like a vintage poster. But it's still true, not so much for syphilis and gonorrhea, although to a certain extent that's also the case, but for things like herpes and HPV that are so common, a person can carry those viruses and not have any symptoms. So that's why the sex educators are saying now that, you know what, once you become sexually active, just prepare yourself. You're going to get one of those STDs because everyone does. Everyone gets them, which is a preposterous thing to say. It's like saying, we're all for healthy sexuality, but, P.S., you become sexually active, you get an infection, you get sick. It's really quite amazing that sex educators do that, and there's a video from Planned Parenthood that you can find on YouTube of a medical doctor actually telling young people, once you become sexually active, just plan to get the HPV. We all do. This is just wildly medically inaccurate, and there's millions and millions of people who are sexually active and do not have a sexually transmitted infection. You're not told about the severe emotional consequences to having sexually transmitted infections. And I'm going to just go quickly through this, that people who are diagnosed with these STDs, they're shocked, they're fearful, they're angry, they're embarrassed, they have disgust for themselves. It's a very, very difficult thing to go through. In a study in New Zealand, 75% of patients had depression and anger. And what I want to tell you is that, you see, when you're a young person and you're in college and your life is in front of you and you get a diagnosis and you don't know when you got it and who you got it from and how it's going to impact your life. And most importantly, who's going to want you now? It's a devastating thing. And I saw this over and over again. And it impacts your life. It impacts your day-to-day living. You might have trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating, trouble studying. Okay, and sometimes someone would go into student health and get a diagnosis of herpes or human papillomavirus, and it's like the day before their finals, or the day before the MCATs, or the day before the LSATs. And then they bomb those tests because they're so upset about this diagnosis. So these are not little things. These are big things, and it can derail a person's life for a long time. Now, if you don't have to believe me, actually. I urge you to go online, and you can find these virtual support groups online for people with STDs. There are entire communities in which people anonymously log on to just support each other and tell their stories, and sometimes find friends and significant others or what have you. And they're huge communities. You can go on there and start reading the stories, okay? If you know somebody who you think is at risk for sexually transmitted diseases, if they're behaving in a way that is irresponsible and just not thought out, and you care about them, sit down in front of a computer, go onto one of those websites. Oh my gosh, I'm telling you, 10 minutes reading these stories, real stuff from people who just found out that they were infected or have been infected for a few years, and they're reporting on how they're doing and how they're coping. Very, very powerful stuff. Okay, you're not told, there's so much stuff. I want to get to the good. There's some good stuff that I want to get to in a few minutes. Okay, you're not told that the human papillomavirus can be transmitted through oral sex and cause throat cancer. You're not told that anal intercourse is much, much more dangerous than vaginal intercourse. What kids are told is that there's 3 kinds of intercourse, anal, oral, and vaginal, and that you just wear condoms, and there's no discussion of the various risks. The truth is that anal intercourse is at least, in terms of HIV transmission, at least 30 times more dangerous than vaginal intercourse. And the research there is no research that shows that condoms are effective in anal intercourse in preventing transmission of HIV. You know what? I'm going to take that back. There are some studies that show decreased transmission of HIV with condoms. However, all the studies that are done, like if you look at a condom package, there's a warning on there, and it says that any use of this condom, aside from vaginal intercourse, something to the tune of, there's no guarantee of, in other words, that these condoms are made with vaginal intercourse in mind, because the research with anal intercourse is very, very sparse, and because anal intercourse is just a whole different story in terms of physiology and the sense, the lining. I don't want to. You just had your breakfast. Like, you don't want to hear so much about this, okay? When I write my books, the editors sometimes will come to me and say, Miriam, I know that this is important science, but we just can't include this material because the ick factor is too high. And so certain things don't even get into my books because they're afraid people will go into Barnes & Noble and open a book and, we don't want to read about this. But this is the reality, and kids are being told, like yourself and your younger siblings and your kids, when they grow up, are going to be told also that all these behaviors are just fine. Not only fine, but you should experiment and you should explore, and maybe you'll like it. And this is just simply, from a medical point of view, promoting high-risk behavior. And by the way, I tell this to everyone who comes into my office. Well, not everyone, but the young people that come in. If we talk about sexuality, I will explain to them the dangers of anal intercourse, and I will urge them just not to do it. And I want you to know that even, when I tell this to the gay guys, they are grateful and they thank me. There used to be, until about a year and a half ago, a warning on the FDA website. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is responsible for the safety, the efficacy of medical devices. Condoms are considered a medical device. And so they used to have this quote here from the Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop. He was a Surgeon General under Reagan, and he was the Surgeon General at the time when, in the early 80s, when HIV and AIDS came to the forefront. And so he said condoms provide some protection, but anal intercourse is simply too dangerous to practice. This was up on the FDA website for, over 30 years. It was taken down about a year and a half ago. Why do you think it was taken down? Did anatomy and physiology change? Did biology change? Did anal intercourse suddenly become safer? Absolutely not. It's the culture that's changing, and it's the political correctness, and this was taken down, but it's still true. Okay. You don't know, you're not told about studies that show that couples that defer intimate behavior are actually happier in their relationships later on in life. There was a study that was done, it was reported in 2012 in the Journal of Marriage and Family. They looked at 600 couples that were either married or cohabiting with minor children, and it showed that early sexual involvement was negatively associated with marital quality among the women. Okay? The women who took longer to become intimate, at least 6 months, reported that they were happier in all aspects of their marriage, including the sexual aspect of their marriage. You're not told about that either. They were just happier with their relationships, the level of commitment, their intimacy, their sexual satisfaction, and so on. You're not told about that. And the reason you're not told is because the priority of sex education is to promote sexual license, sexual freedom, and not sexual health. And the truth is that when sexual license reigns and when people go out at an early age and experiment and have multiple partners, then their sexual health suffers. You're not told about the incredible biochemistry of attachment. You're not told, you're not given a sense of awe for how we are designed, for how our bodies, male and female, are designed to bond and attach through intimate behavior. And there's this wonderful new field called the biochemistry of attachment, and it's based almost completely, but not all, on this hormone called oxytocin. Both men and women have oxytocin, but it's primarily a female hormone, and it is made stronger, shall we say, by the presence of high levels of estrogen, the female hormone. A hormone is a molecule that travels from one organ to another with a message. And oxytocin has all kinds of messages that it delivers. What you need to know is that oxytocin was first discovered as the hormone that is involved in labor and delivery and nursing, because it is released by the brain and causes the uterus to contract, push out the baby, and then also for the milk to come down and be available. So it was discovered over 100 years ago that it was primarily this hormone that was involved in labor, delivery, and nursing. However, we know now, in the past few decades, that oxytocin is also released during intimate sexual behavior, even a prolonged hug, okay, holding hands, gazing, a positive, loving gaze into the eyes of a person that you care about releases oxytocin, and oxytocin affects the brain, and it causes us to feel attachment, trust, and love. It also causes us to minimize a person's shortcomings and to not be as aware of those little things that might bother us. All these things are wonderful: to trust, to love, to be attached, to not be critical. They're wonderful if you're with someone that you know that you know is a good person and you want to be attached to them and be committed to them. But when it's like a one-time thing and a hookup, that's where you start getting into trouble. And well, I'm sorry, let me just explain that this was a very interesting experiment that was reported on in the journal called Neuron, and it showed that individuals that are given you can buy oxytocin, by the way, it's on Amazon. You can buy little vials of oxytocin, and you can you can inhale it, and it has an effect. It does have an effect. It's a very interesting thing. It's also, because it has an effect on trust, it's being used now experimentally in individuals with autism. Kids with autism, as you know, and adults have trouble with their interpersonal connection. They're more connected to things than to people. They're not comfortable usually with interaction. They don't make so much eye contact. They're not good at reading facial cues. And oxytocin helps with all that. So there are quite a few clinicians out there that are, you don't need a prescription for it actually. You can just, like I said, go on Amazon to get it. But the bottom line here why I'm discussing this is because you're not told that intimate behavior leads to feelings of trust and attachment. And these girls, again, mostly girls who are more vulnerable, would come into my office and say, you know, I hooked up with this guy a few times. I really wasn't interested in him at all. And what's wrong with me? Because now I can't stop thinking about him. I keep waiting for him to text me, to call me. What's wrong with me, Dr. Grossman? And so it's a double whammy, because not only is there this sense of, you know, I had sex with this person and now he doesn't even know my name and care about me. There's that part, which is painful. But then there's the other part, because people think there's something wrong with them. They think everyone's hooking up and just having a great time and not experiencing any of this stuff. Not true. Not true at all. This is how our biology works. So all this research that you're not told about. Oxytocin basically switches love and trust on, and it switches caution and aversion off. And this does occur also in men to a certain degree. And we all know that men also get deeply, deeply attached to their intimate partners. And they have their own set of hormones that also causes these feelings. It just does appear that with women it happens quicker. This is an article about using oxytocin in autistic individuals, especially high-functioning people with Asperger's. Okay, what I want to move on to next, and this is very cool stuff, is you're not told how different the massive differences between male and female. And I know that a lot of the other speakers, I mean, I don't know if this was part of your program or not, but a lot of the speakers at this conference have talked about the differences between male and female. So this is the X and Y chromosomes, and it used to be thought before the biotechnological revolution, okay, it was thought that the Y chromosome, that little guy over there on the right side, was basically empty. It was called a genetic wasteland. It was thought that the only information that's on that Y chromosome has to do with like growing a beard and, you know, having, you know, a male anatomy and a lower voice, and that was it. And the rest of the differences between male and female were due to society, were due to socialization, were due to the fact that, you know, the pink blanket versus the blue blanket and all the expectations, giving the dolls to the girls and the guns to the boys. And this was an assumption that was made. And sex educators, even though it's been completely revealed and disproven, sex educators continue to teach young people that it's basically society that determines whether you are more feminine or masculine. So so now that we've been able to look at the genome and to map it out, this is, I'm not expecting you to see the details here, but just this is the Y chromosome. Look at how much is on there. It is packed with genetic information that is missing from the X chromosome. We know that that the male and female brains are different, and that difference begins at 8 weeks post-conception. In an 8-week-old embryo, we can already identify a male versus a female brain. If you give dolls and trucks to monkeys, lo and behold, you know what? The girls, the one on the right, they pick the dolls. The boys pick the little trucks, the little cars. Do we have gender stereotypes in the animal kingdom? I don't think so. It's because the brain is different. It's due to hormones. It's due to a hormone such as estrogen and testosterone, the male and female hormones. Now I want to go in just to a few minutes, the most fascinating stuff. I love this stuff, and I think you're going to love it too. Okay, so this is there a baby that needs to be nursed maybe, or? So estrogen is the female hormone, and young women and women of childbearing age, their estrogen levels change from day to day. They are never the same. This is just a graph of estrogen levels as you go through a month, 28 days, a 28-day cycle. You can see how there isn't, from one day to the next, the levels are different. I don't have the testosterone graph right here, but basically testosterone, flat. It's basically the same. Guys are kind of, more emotionally, I'm not talking about every single person, okay? There are always exceptions. But if you look at a bell curve, in general, there's a certain emotional stability and a day-to-day lack of variation among guys than girls. And Luann Briseldine, who is a psychiatrist who writes about the male and female brain at the University of California at San Francisco, she said in her book, The Female Brain, that it is so deeply affected by hormones that their influence can be said to create a woman's reality. So I'm going to give you some incredible examples here of things that are happening beneath the surface that you're not told about. I have kids come into my office and they say, well, yeah, I slept with my girlfriend, I slept with my boyfriend, but no, we were just in the same bed together. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. We just fell asleep in the same bed. Nothing happened. Right. Nothing happened. Wait till you see what happens. No sex, just lying close together. Okay, first what I want to tell you is that as a woman goes through the month, not only is her uterus, in terms of her menstrual cycle, we all know about that an egg develops and then the uterine lining develops, and then if there's no fertilization, she gets her period, and then that's her cycle. But you know what? Her entire being cycles, not just her reproductive system in her uterus. So here's a study that showed that facial attractiveness increased during the fertile phase of the menstrual cycle, meaning the fertile phase here, so estrogen levels, so these first few days here would be the days of bleeding. Okay, then estrogen starts going up, and then around the middle of the cycle, like day 12, 13, 14, estrogen just zooms up there. It just goes way up high, and then near the top there is when ovulation occurs. Ovulation occurs, estrogen goes down, then it has another peak, then it goes way down, and then the period starts, and we're way back here. So when I talk about the fertile time in the cycle, it's right at that peak when estrogen is way up high. So it has been shown that a woman's face appears more attractive when she is fertile. a woman can only become pregnant. She's really only fertile for a few days out of her cycle, whereas, as we know, guys are fertile all the time. And so most of the month she's actually infertile. But these studies that I'm about to explain to you compared women during their fertile time versus their infertile time. So if you look, this woman was asked to come in without any makeup or any jewelry or anything like that during the fertile time of her month and during the infertile time of her month. And then guys were asked, is she looking more attractive? I'm going to be honest with you. I forgot which one it is. They look the same to me. Yeah, just the men, just the men. So how many men think the one on the right looks better? And the one on the left? Really? See, maybe her eyes look a little more open, or? Okay, don't talk. I don't want anyone to talk. I'm going to show you another one. Okay, guys, the lady on the right, look at that, not one person. The one on the left looks better. She's wearing the same earrings. Different turtleneck? Okay, so people were shown a whole lot of pictures like this, and it was the statistic. It was a statistically significant difference between. In other words, they were able to tell. They were able to tell that at their fertile time, the face was more attractive. Now, as women get closer to their fertile time, they will dress more nicely. They will wear more makeup. They will just pay more attention to the way they're looking. They even shop differently. And as they get close to their fertile time of their period, of their cycle, they tend to be more involved with buying like hair products and clothes and shoes. And their infertile period, they buy food. All right, now get a load of this. As a woman goes through the month, her odor actually changes. And there's a way that a person's odor is collected, both from men and women. This is what they do in the research lab. They ask people not to shower for a few days, not to wear any deodorant, and then they have them wear these like cotton pads under their arms, and they collect the chemicals and the scent, okay, in the cotton, and then they use that for research. So that they did this, and men found the scent of a woman more attractive during her fertile time. And it works both ways. When a man inhales the scent of a fertile woman, it causes his testosterone to go up. When a man's testosterone goes up, he's more interested in sex, he's more territorial, like all those masculine traits. So the scent of a fertile woman brings out the masculine traits of a man. And so when these kids are coming and saying, we just slept next to each other, nothing happened between us, oh boy, there's a lot going on that you would never know. This is a study that was done on the scent of a man, and it affected a woman's cycle. It made her ovulate earlier when she was inhaling the scent of a male scent. It actually changed her cycle just a bit so that ovulation occurred earlier. Okay, so we are made in a wondrous way, and none of this is being conveyed to you. Women, there are these minor changes in the way a woman talks when she's fertile versus infertile. There was a study done actually at UCLA, and young women came in at different times in their cycle, and they were recorded saying hello, I'm a student at UCLA. That's it. That's it. The men picked up something in the tone of voice that was different during her fertile versus infertile times. The way a woman moves. Okay, they devised this ingenious kind of study where they videotaped women, I don't know if they were walking or dancing, and they made it in such a way so that it was just a silhouette. You couldn't see her face, you couldn't see what she was wearing, but men found her body movements to be more attractive at that time of month. None of this is true if she's on the pill, by the way, because the pill is going to suppress that whole cycle. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But this research is only true if a woman is not on a hormonal contraceptive. Okay. Some very clever researchers at in a lab in Colorado Springs decided to go and study lap dancers. And they went to a men's, what do they call those places? Gentleman's lounge or whatever they're called. And they got a number of women who worked as lap dancers. And they asked them to keep a diary for a few months of where they were in their cycle, when they had their periods and so on, and how much money they made every day. Now, they primarily make their money from tips. And they're making tips from men who enjoy them, correct? So, here is the graph of tips that the ladies were making as they go through the month. This is the dollars earned per shift. $100 at the top, $400. These are the days of the month. These red days are during her period. These are the women not on the pill. Now, let me show you. I'm going to impose on this her estrogen levels. Do you see that? That is amazing. As her estrogen levels go up, she is more attractive. And maybe I didn't mention something important, which is that it's not only all these physical things, women also feel more confident and more social and more attractive as their estrogen levels go up. Okay, and now this dashed one is the women on the pill. And they don't have that big peak. They're not making as much money. Okay? They don't have that huge peak. They're making like half the amount than their colleagues, so to speak, who are off the pill. Okay. Now, I want you to walk away really, aside from all this information that I've given you, I want to impress upon you how much you are not being told and just how much is available out there, the amazing science about men and women and relationships and love and sexuality. Now, because there's so much that's not being told, I decided recently that I need to go out and start writing stuff for little kids so that they can learn from an early age some of this amazing science. And I wrote recently this book that just came out actually a few days ago, and I have it at this conference for the very first time. It's called The Black and White Puppy, A Story About the Biology of Love. And it's for little kids, like 3 to 6 years old, and it's a picture book, but it includes, in a way that a little child will understand, some of the information that I've presented to you today. I mean, nothing about STDs or anything like that, but just about the special biology of closeness and the special biology of love and snuggling and how it's special when you snuggle and you're inhaling the scent of the person next to you and so on and so forth. So I would like to invite you to visit my table that's in the exhibit, the exhibit area. I have this and other books available. It's also available in Spanish. And I also want to say two things. and that is that I am looking for an intern because I need help with social media. I need help with Facebook and Twitter to get this message out more and more. I don't know how to do that stuff. I know how to write, and I know how to do research, and I know how to sit in the medical library. I don't know how to do Facebook. I need help. If there's anyone here who's really good at that, if there's anyone who's like passionate about this stuff and thinks it's really, really cool and wants to get the word out, please, I can be contacted in a lot of different ways, but I'd love to meet you in person and we could talk. I'll be there in the afternoon. Also, I have a wonderful volunteer assistant. Could you stand up? Come on, Beth. Okay, this is Beth, turn around. Elizabeth Christie, who's my volunteer assistant, who makes all of this possible. Otherwise, I'd be lost. And if you could come by our table and introduce yourselves, and I'll either meet you today or maybe I can meet you through Skype and we can talk, because I really need to get the word out. Not long ago, around Valentine's Day, I wrote a blog about 50 Shades of Grey, and it went viral. I had no idea this would happen. I got over 1.5 million hits on my website. Yeah. I said that it's about an unhealthy relationship and that it's a dangerous movie and people shouldn't go see it. I said that a healthy woman dreams of wedding gowns, not handcuffs. So the thing is, though, that it went viral, and then I didn't know what to do with it. I was like, whoa, look at all these people who love what I'm saying. I didn't know how to, I don't even know what I didn't know how to do. Like when you get that many people, right, they're your followers. You have to do something with that, right? And I didn't know what to do, so I need help. So please help me. Thank you.